Welcome to the Working Audio Tools podcast, the podcast and home of all things mixing and audio related, with myself, Ed Thorne, and Paul Third. This week, we're going to be talking about a controversial subject, which is going to follow on from the headphone versus speaker debate for mixing music. Which one do you prefer? Let us know in the comments. What's your main go-to? Can you mix on both? Let us know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below. But what we want to do is discuss a concept that has been emerging upon our conversations with our mentors and our interviews on the podcast with some of the really high-profile engineers that we've had on the podcast. And that is basically that translation is difficult, but there are potentially ways around it. However, it seems like there's going to be a lot of work, doesn't it, Paul?
Yes, unbelievably difficult. Probably one of the most difficult things that I've kind of stumbled upon in audio engineering.
I think we've kind of reached an apex, haven't we, with our development as mix engineers, and this is not the final piece, because there'll always be more pieces to learn, but this is a big chunk of what we've struggled with. But we're really going down rabbit holes on this subject and paying attention to things people are telling us. But before we get into what this concept is, a little word on our sponsors for this episode. This episode is sponsored by Baby Audio, again, a maker of creative instruments and effects for music production. Baby Audio plugins are all about solving problems and adding character to your mix, including Spaced Out, the lush effects processor combining reverb, delay, and modulation into one plugin. Check it out on this slide guitar part. We'll play the dry audio first and then the wet. Go to babyaudio.io to learn more and get 15% off any order with the code WHAT15 at checkout. So the question is there a magic plugin, a magic tool, or a magic trick that results in mixed translation? And the answer is most definitely no. But we're considering a headphone versus speaker concept where actually your mixers have to translate on everything, including festival speakers, if you're lucky enough to work for a hugely successful artist. And they all operate differently. We're talking about the concepts such as near field versus midfield versus, main speaker translation versus PA system and festival translation. We're talking about mono translation for festival stuff as well. And also different headphones, earbuds, over-ear headphones. You know what I'm talking about, guys. But the concept ultimately is hybrid monitoring. Paul, what are your thoughts on hybrid monitoring?
It's something that I really, really didn't want to get into because I'm so unbelievably tight. I got set on the headphones and I was getting quite good translation to speakers.
You were adamant you would never mix on speakers 2 years ago.
I know, but at the end of the day, as much as,
I corrupted you.
You did, yes. But as much as, my mentors like Emre Çelik, can do full mixes, and our good friend MSM, has been known to do a full mix on a pair of headphones. As good as these guys are as mixing on headphones, they still are hybrid, and they still mix on speakers. Like Emre still has a hybrid approach and mixes on speakers. Em still mixes on speakers. And there are many, many, many engineers that we speak to in the industry that are pretty hybrid. I'm not going to tell you which engineer it is, but I've speaking to quite a big engineer recently, and they told me that a mix that they did on quite a big album that's just came out was one of the songs was done completely on a train with Apple Max headphones. The whole mix was done on Apple Max headphones. And I was like,
but surely it was checked on speakers before it was submitted for approval.
Oh, maybe the A&R and stuff, but no, I think he was travelling and he sent it out, and listen to it, sounds absolutely fine. You would never know.
Excellent.
And, that's the thing. But again, the reason that this engineer was able to do that is because they've learned how to, one, mix on speakers, and two, mix on headphones. And that is something that was great about this podcast early doors, was it was very much like headphones versus speakers. And now what me and Ed have done is we've now kind of
Become
done
each
that.
other.
We've just met in the middle now.
God forbid.
So Ed's,
I'm now autistic.
Yeah. Oh, well,
Paul's now handsome.
oh, fuck off. What an absolute arsehole. Remember, I'll always be taller than you. Just remember that. Just always remember that.
That's true.
But Ed doesn't remember, as he said last week, he doesn't bother about the height thing. Okay. It doesn't bother him. I think what's most important is that what me and Ed have learned is that as good as you can get on one system, it's great that you can nail a system. And I think I've managed to get headphone mixing pretty good. There's still a difference in mixing on speakers. And what I've found is that if you mix too much on speakers, then mostly people that listen on speakers are going to be like, I prefer that mix. But then you'll get people that listen on headphones and go, oh, actually, I prefer Paul's mix. And we found that quite a lot. Where really,
we did find that, didn't we?
Yeah, where really, when you think about it, why don't you just get a really good headphone setup and a really good speakers setup and then get an average of the two of them in real time so you know that you could meet the average? And I think that's what we've learned, is that that's what the best managed to do. I know from a few interviews that Spike Stent has done mixes on headphones, and I know that he does check on headphones. I'm pretty sure he's definitely a speaker man. Serbin, we don't know much about Serbin, but predominantly I think he's a speaker man. But from everybody that I've spoken to, it seems that everybody does check on headphones these days, whether it be Odyssey headphones, whether it be the old Andrew Sheps thing about. But I'm bored of the Andrew Sheps story. It's like everybody's ripped the arse out of it now, and it's got a little bit boring.
Can you tell it again? Because I'm not sure which one you're
Basically,
referring to.
it was I think an interview that Andrew Sheps done, and he was telling loads of people, I mix on the Sony headphones. I think I might be wrong here, but I think like the ones that many people use for tracking, the ones that have got like the little blue band, they're like the most popular tracking headphones probably. And he was like, I learned them, and I was mixing on them for a long time, and he was getting good results with them. And then everybody the internet jumped on saying, well, that's all you need to do is just learn your monitoring and you could mix on anything. And I'm like, it's just one example, you know what I mean? But again, like I've heard, interviews, and apparently, again, he's went back to speakers, I think, but he's probably hybrid. And it's what we do is we tend to focus, and I've been that guy, where we tend to focus on one piece of monitoring because it suits us. You know what I mean? And I get it. There's certain people that are in compromised spaces, and headphones are really their only option. However, if you plan to do this professionally, then obviously we would always advise to get your own, separate room where you can treat it properly, and you can get speakers in, and you can have the two. Because what I'm finding is that by learning speakers, it's just giving me this. I'm making certain little different mixed translation things. I'm finding that I'm able to just hone what I'm hearing on headphones a little bit better, and I just find that when I go between the two of them, I get a better average. How have you been finding it mixing a little bit more? I know you're predominantly like 80-90% on the PSIs and the Amphions, but I do know you have been, referencing on the Sennheisers and the Neumanns. How have you been finding that little bit of transition, that ease into headphones a little bit?
Well, I have been considering doing some mixing full-time on headphones just for a bit. I've had a couple of sets of headphones arrive this week, which are quite interesting, which we can talk about in another episode when I know them better. But I've considered doing a full mix on headphones. I have done one mix on entirely on headphones that I put out that was a song of mine called Bright Lights, and it's not the best mix I've done by a long way, but it was an interesting process. That was a COVID mix, so that was literally, I was annoying the F out of my housemate. So resorted to headphones. This concept for me is fascinating because maybe, I don't know how many mixes ago, but early on in our mix comparison journey, there is a playlist, by the way, for those people watching on YouTube and listening on YouTube for just of the mix comparison episodes. And I think it became apparent, didn't it, between the two of us that I was mixing on speakers,
yeah, totally,
and you were mixing on headphones, because we were giving each other comments and be like, yeah, but I'm not hearing that on the speakers. And you were like, well, I'm not hearing that on the headphones. And then when I tried your mix on headphones, it was, this entire mix makes sense now.
Yep.
And when you were hearing things on speakers, you were like, okay, right, this totally makes sense. So we realized we had to meet in the middle, and it is an average of everything. And I think that's the key word. Average is best, apparently. So I've been using headphones so far, just the Neumann NDH30s for the low end, and the Sennheiser HD490s, which are great value for money headphones, because they both highlight something that I was missing on the speakers. Now, the Amphions have come into the room and they're kind of doing what the Sennheisers were doing, particularly highlighting snare and vocal frequencies in the upper mids. And if anything needs tweaking there, I could address that. And the Neumanns were just, good check for the low end and, relative to other stuff, because I'm having low end issues in this room permanently, which there'll be a video series coming out soon when I reignite my channel documenting all that. But the new headphones I've got, well, I can tell you the first pair, I suppose, which is the Hifiman what is it?
Hifiman Ananda Nano.
Ananda Nanos. For some reason, I just think of anacondas. Maybe that's because I've got average on the brain. I don't know. Moving on. They are incredibly tight headphones, very center orientated. They're not the widest headphones, but the low end on them they're tight and punchy.
You told me PMC earlier. It was like having a pair of PMC 6s on your head.
Yes. So, the PMC 6 speakers, for anyone who's heard those, not the big square PMC 6.2s. I actually think the 6s are better speakers. They just do something. And the low end is so tight. I think PMC, as we've discussed, they just own the low end on speakers. 100%. They are the tightest low end in speakers. These are the headphone equivalent, and the top end, they're a bit bright, aren't they? The Nano, so you have to EQ them to harmon a little bit. And as a result of that, they are very similar to the PMC 6 signature, which I love. I didn't feel like they were quite right for my mixing needs in the studio. But to have them in headphone form with the Hifimans is brilliant. I'm already loving listening to some music on them, and I'm looking forward to getting mixing on those. So basically, I will be up to, at that point, 4 sets of headphones I'm going to be referencing on. I'll probably get lazy and just pull this down to 2, but it'll be 3 sets of speakers, including the PSIs, Amphions, and my Anchor soundbar, which again highlights different things because it's crap. That's the point of it. And then 2 or 3, 4 sets of headphones, a set of gym headphones that sound terrible, and then mobile phone, mono and stereo, vertically and sideways. And what else is... I'm not bothering with the car these days. Is anyone else?
To be fair, no, I don't really give a shit about my car, because
but my van's never at the studio, so I just
they all just seem so different. The fact that what we spoke about last week was that your van has fucking no low end in it. My car has too much low end. How are you meant to like counter for that? You can't really counter for that, can you?
Yeah. But it was interesting getting onto real phones today, and because I've been jumping down that rabbit hole again. Well, not again, for the first time today. And hearing their different car settings and hearing how vastly different they were.
Yeah. And I think that, what me and Ed have slowly been coming to the realization of is that probably the key to doing this professionally is translation. It's not all the micro details that all of you lot in the comments will pick up on. It is normally, a translation thing. That is what sets apart, the top mixers from maybe some of the, I don't want to say amateur mixers, because I think that could be really demoralising term.
I'd say translation sets apart the great mixers from the good mixers.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's the right term.
Because the details like a reverb level or the width of a backing vocal or, the low mids in a guitar or the snare sound, whatever, it's so subjective.
Yeah, totally.
We're going to be slagging each other's snare drum sounds off till the end of time. So those points are almost becoming irrelevant, because what is important is, can it go out onto every system that potentially a client is going to be playing songs on? One of our mentors has said he's been at a festival, hated a snare sound, went back into the session, listened to it, thought, right, I would do that differently now. Or now I know that that's potentially something to be aware of, on an L Acoustics PA 100 meters back from the stage. Those kind of details, I mean, that is OCD obsessive, but I totally respect that level of detail and the commitment to striving for average.
Yeah, I know.
It's amazing.
It's crazy, yeah.
but and this is where I think the greats are. The greats will be able to, and I'm thinking of Spike Stent here because predominantly I understand he's on Neumann KH120s, the analog versions. He knows those speakers and he has a way of getting a mix on those speakers to translate to every medium possible. Yeah. Whether you listen to his stuff on a mobile phone, on a laptop, in your car, it just sounds great. There's nothing wrong with them on any system. That's a genius level of mix engineering for me.
Absolutely.
I suspect the only way he's got to that point in his career is going down these rabbit holes of thinking, well, hang on, what if that EQ move works on this speaker, why does it not work on that headphone?
Yeah.
And if it works on that headphone, why is it not working in the car? And so on, or if I'm hearing too much low-end harmonics in the bass in my room, is that why I'm not getting enough bass in the van? Or is it the opposite? Is there not enough harmonic content? I don't know. All these little things that are going through my mind about my system and setup and translation issues. The only way they've got that good is because they've gone down these rabbit holes, surely, unless they've just got golden ears and an absolute gift.
I think we are coming to the realization of what is required. And I think what is required is to go down this rabbit hole of monitoring where, what I'm doing just now. For example, I'm looking at them right now. The Focal Alpha Twins. Now I was mixing on the Focal Shape 65, and then I had the Kali IN5s in here, and I had the edifiers in here, PreSonus Era Studio 8s. I've got Kali LP8s in the fucking Atmos room.
Paul's got 4 times the amount of speakers as me.
Crazy, yeah. I don't like speakers, fuck speakers, and then end up fucking more than anybody.
How many sets of headphones you got now?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 3 in-ears. Fuck knows, about 9, 10, something like that. And then I've got more coming. Got like a £600 pair of in-ears coming, and then I've got the Odysseys coming, hopefully tomorrow, maybe the next day.
Okay. Call that a draw, because I think including in-ear monitors, I'm on about 11 or 12.
Yeah, it's mental.
12.
Now, the important thing that what we've learned is that having too much can be a bad thing, because you can distract yourself and you can drive yourself crazy trying to be like, oh, well, that's not working in that, so I need to fix that. But then you fix one problem, you create another problem somewhere else.
Yeah, yes, and you can unfold and ruin a mix
very quickly.
Easily.
So I think what we think that the pros have done is that they have went down the rabbit hole and they have tried different speakers, they have tried different headphones, and they've got to a point where they have got a system that works for them. I mean, at the end of the day, our Lord and Saviour Spike Stent, he was mixing on KRK, the old KRKs, for God knows how long, until he got the Neumanns. You're talking well over a decade. Like, he was a KRK man. And, now there weren't rockets for anybody getting excited. So I'm sorry to tell you.
Talking V800s, V series?
V7 or something, wasn't there? Something like that. Yeah, V700 or something like that. And he was mixing on those for a long time. And, the reason he did that and he never changed was because he knew that sound. He knew that it worked. Now, I think what I'm finding with all these speakers is that every single speaker that I have in here, I'll mix differently on. And it's very, very dangerous. And I think that's why many people have a set of monitors that they trust and they never ever change. And it's maybe the reason why people spend so much on their monitoring. Like, what I find interesting with that Mark Daniel Nelson mix that we put out last week again, and we were showing our most recent mixes, I did that most recent mix purposefully on the Kali IN5s, which is their coaxial 3-ways. And when I put in the Focal Shape 65s and I redid the mix, the amount of differences I was hearing in Mark's mix shaped the way how I changed and the decisions I made. But I sent it to Ed, and then he was like, "Yeah, Paul, this is the best mix that you've done so far." So, what did you hear in my?
So just for clarity, the mix Paul's talking about wasn't in the last episode that we just did. He did this since, and I can say it is definitely the best version.
What did you hear different? What did you hear different to the decisions I made in the Focal mix compared to the Kali mix? What did you hear?
DistroKid sponsor the Working Audio Tools podcast, and you can get 30% off your first year's subscription using the VIP link in the YouTube video description and podcast show notes. DistroKid makes distribution of your music easy with unlimited uploads, and you get to keep 100% of your royalties and earnings. Join over 1 million artists who rely on DistroKid to get their music into Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube Music, TikTok, Tidal, Instagram, and all other streaming platforms now and in the future. The new DistroKid app is available on iOS. Go and download it from the App Store now. From here, you can upload new releases. You can see your DistroKid earnings and withdraw these earnings. You can view and share your hyperfollow links. You can check your streaming statistics from Spotify and Apple, and even add and edit lyrics and song titles. So keep track of your releases on the move with the new DistroKid app, available on iOS. Download it from the App Store now. It just didn't sound like a mix, it just sounded like a song.
Right, okay.
And that for me is job done at that point.
Gee,
if you're listening to a mix, there's things wrong with it.
That's a good point.
Or there's things that aren't translating. If you're listening to it as a song, you've forgotten that you're listening to a mix, and that is job done.
Yeah, and I think, looking back, for anybody asking, what was it? I think what I was able to hear in the vocals that I wasn't hearing in the IN5s was the low end, and I was kind of feeling maybe low end harmonics, and maybe I think the bass just wasn't filling up the room. The IN5s in my room, the IN5s just cannot fill the room because I've got a big wall of glass on the left hand side, and I've got loads of curtains covering that wall. So high end reflection wise, it's fine, but obviously low end is just passing through. So I can't really get a big bass build up in this room because I've got like a 4.5 meter wall. That's like,
and you're a lucky bugger because of it.
Yeah, I know. So obviously, the bass isn't filling out the room, and I think that with the vocals, the Shape 65s, because the low end is really great and really detailed, and it is blossoming and it's blooming and it fills out the room, I was just hearing the mix differently, and I was like, oh, I need to bring more low end back in the back end vocals, because I was hearing things in Mark's mix that I wasn't hearing on the Kali's, because I wasn't hearing that how the low end was filling up the room in Mark's mix. And I was like, right, bass, okay, I need to add like a Pultec to this bass, and the bass needs to fill out more of the lower mid-range. Maybe it needs a bit more 150, 200. It's like, right, let's bring a Pultec on the bass. Added more sub to the bass. And then I was like, right, the punch, where's the low end of that snare went? Added a little bit more, like I think I brought the high pass down to the snare. I compressed the snare. I was like, I can actually hear that I maybe should compress the snare a little bit more. And then I was just making these differences, and I was like, the mix isn't bright enough. Started brightening up the snare a little bit, because I felt that on the Kali's, the mix sounded a little bit too, I think it was toppy to my ear, so I made the mix dull, and you can see that on the measurements that we had in Expose. And it's amazing how, like, two speakers in the exact same position made me make very, in my opinion, drastic differences, because I heard the mix differently. And so I was on the Shapes for a week, and then I was like, right, okay, let's just quickly put the IN5s back in the same position that they were, both in the same position. And then I put the IN5s in, and I was like, whoa, I was like, this isn't what I've been hearing. It's like, this is drastically different. This sounds thin. I was like, oh, wow, what's going on here? And I was like, whoa, I just want the shapes back. And what's interesting, and I don't love about audio actually, but it interests me, but it's a Jekyll and Hyde, is that you could probably get Ed to listen to the Focal Shape 65s, and he'd be like, can't mix on these. And because many people talk about the Focal, Emra said this to me, Ems said it to me, and Emra has said it to me, is that Focals have a house sound. And I don't really get it yet, because I don't have that much experience yet, but...
As in the genre house?
No, they've got like a house sound, and maybe like like what you said about Amphion. Like how like all Amphions sound the same, all Neumanns all kind of sound the same. There seems to be what many people talk about as a Focal sound. Now, I think many people have, when they say that, they're talking about the older Focals, not like the red ones that have all got the beryllium tweeters in them. Because the one thing I love about the Shapes is the tweeter, and I actually quite like the Alphas for that as well. Now I'm getting a little bit used to them, because they're now in the position and I'm trying them out. But even still, the Focal Shape 65 definitely sounds different from the Focal Alpha Twins. And again, because it's a different, but again, these are a 2.5. They call it 2.5, so it's tweeter in the middle, horizontal orientation. And Ed, you won't know this, but it's quite interesting, right? So what you do is it gives you the option of which left or right woofer driver you choose as the bass and which one you choose as the mids.
Yeah.
So it's like, so if you want to go like tweeters in, obviously you would, on the switch, you would go like right, left. And then
that's a neat feature, so you don't have to swap the speakers around.
Yes, and that means that if you've kind of got modal issues in your room, you could really choose where most of that bass energy is coming out of. So it might actually help you with kind of maybe low end issues in your room. And yeah, it's just fascinating. Even how in the Callies, in the exact same position, they've got and as the focals, they've got a -6. They've got a 6 dB null around 80. They're front ported, as are these Alpha Twins. And see, when I put the focal shapes in the room, no null, like no 6 dB null, because of the passive radiators on the side. And when I sat back and I was like, right, so not only have you got massive differences in the design of the speaker, you've got differences when it comes to the position of the speaker, you've got differences in crossovers, which I could definitely hear in some speakers. You've got differences in how the low end fills up the room, how it interacts with the room. There's just so many factors in speakers that can genuinely take a mix from something one way to the other way, and you're in the same desk listening to the same song. Where in headphones, what I like about headphones is that you could get your EQ right, and if you've got your EQ right, you've got a good headphone amp and a good DAC. That's it. You could take it anywhere. You could take that system anywhere, and you don't need to worry about anything.
Yeah. Then in headphones, if you've got 3 sets of headphones and you've matched them all to Harman, and they're capable of performing to the EQ gain adjustments, level adjustments, amplitude adjustments, you're then benefiting from the different characteristics that they can give. Whether it be the Ananda Nanos that are but they're a bit more center focused. Whereas, though, as you've said, I've not tried the HE1000s yet, but apparently, I have, haven't I?
I remember they're fucking woof.
And they're it's like all side information and not so much of the middle. So between the two, they both have a purpose view, which is great. And then you've got the Sonys as well for the low mids you were saying last week. So do you think it's about finding a process moving between the different tools to get to the final result? For example, I'm starting mixes on the PSIs with the sub to get the low end, what I think is right. And then I would move to the Amphions once I've got a good low end and a vocal sound going, because the Amphions are going to highlight something in the snare and the vocals almost every time. Not that something is wrong, but just something that needs to be tweaked to translate. And then at the end, so when you said I was 80-20 speakers to headphones, that's probably about right, because the last hour of most mixers is spent working on translation, going through the different headphones, referencing on those. Is it working? And I mean, it might be 2 hours, because it will usually result in some changes need to being made. But then you got to go back to the beginning and just think, well, hang on, have I overdone it? Have I taken the snare drum out of the PSIs now? Or, where's the balance? So is there one system that is perfect for every room? Maybe there is, but my God, you'd have to try every single speaker possible. Even then, you've got to get your acoustics right.
And I think that's what kind of me and you are in that journey now. You started yours earlier, and I'm kind of doing it now. Speakers are just a bollock, and I'm like, I was happy with my headphones. Why did I do this? But one thing I have to admit is just
ignorance is bliss, for sure.
But I think having an actual representation, because at the end of the day, as good as the Olo S5X are with real phones, it is really, really, really realistic. Having a setup in here that is actual speakers and multiple speakers, that's what I think. Ed was the guy that kind of got me thinking, right, yeah, I definitely need to get multiple monitors in here. One just isn't enough. And I think personally,
because me mixing on just the PSIs wasn't working, was it?
And I genuinely do believe that as much as you can make a really good investment and get a really good pair of ETCs, PMCs, again, you can get the big massive Neumanns that NetM's got and stuff, but I think that having different monitors that you can trust is really important. And as you said about the headphones, it's about trying to have different monitoring that you can trust, where they tell you different things, but at the end of the day, the mix still sounds like the mix. You can put that back, and as you said about the focals, you can listen to it and go, sounds like a song. Okay, let's get the headphones on. Yep, sounds like the same song It's telling the same story. It's got the same vibe to it. Right. Okay, maybe just need to do a little bit of a tweak here. Right, okay, does that impact the speakers? Actually, no, it doesn't actually really impact the speakers. And then before you know it, you build that average. But it's an average that you can't do. I mean, you can try and do it with Slate VSX. You can try and do it with all those. And know what? I know many people that get damn close and do a fucking damn good job. But I think what's important about the speaker side of it, from those coming from the headphone side, that are like, oh, it's a bollock. The amount of stuff I've learned is unbelievable. And I think what's important is being able to actually physically hear, so this is what so-and-so might be hearing. This is what people are hearing on speakers. This is what people might be hearing on speakers in a room that isn't that well treated, that's maybe got a big, massive build-up. This is what people... And you know, the whole process from treating the room, trying out different speakers, it trained my ear. And I'm now thinking, right, what I now need to do is I now need to find a monitoring setup speaker-wise that I can trust. And that's what I'm trying to find now. And I think the Focal Shape 65s are looking to be the one, because they don't sound like anything else that I've tried so far. But even just understanding the nuances of speakers. So if you go into somebody else's room, you could make heads or tails of, because I know there's certain people that have to work in different rooms. And that's something, you know, that Spike Stent talked about, where he used to always take a pair of headphones with him, because he would be like, right, I'd be in a room, I'd move the speakers about, and I was like, I just can't mix in this room. And that's why it's very important to have a room that you work in all the time, that you trust. But if there is an occasion where you do have to do work in another room, it's important to understand the actual sound of speakers, so you can try and identify, what is it that I don't like? Is it the position that I don't like? Can I move the speakers? Do I need calibrated? Do I need to change calibration? Is it the crossovers I don't like? Are the speakers too bright, so I can maybe go in the back and maybe if I've got DSP and bring the speakers down? You know what I mean? It's been interesting. I mean, even just like the fact that I know for a fact I can hear when there's a good crossover in a speaker is mental, because I would have never been able to tell you like what a good crossover in a speaker sounds like. And trust me, it's very important when you're mixing, because one thing that somebody mentioned to me this week, I'm not going to say who, but a very big mentor of ours had said to us, what you two are figuring out now is that monitoring is so important, and that what's most important is finding a monitoring setup that doesn't distract you. And as soon as he said that, I was like, that's what the edifiers do. As much as I love the edifiers, and they've got all this depth and they've got this separation, and I'm like, wow, it's like, these fucking mixes sound great. And I'm like, Serbian mixes sound great, and other mixes sound pretty shit, so they're quite revealing. But when I go to mix on them, because everything is so separate and the depth is so much, and I could hear this reverb tail, and I could hear this and that, I just find I get distracted because I could hear everything a bit too well.
And that's me on the PSIs.
Yeah. And
whereas though what the Amphions deliver is the lack of distraction.
Yep.
They just tell you, they're like, yeah, do this, do that, cool.
And what's the speakers that we've been finding are finding that are getting talked about the most in speaker translation? Amphions. And guess what? Was I massively impressed when I was in that shitty Amphion room? No. But again, as I will say, and I remember, we were very, very clear in that video. I think we did a good job of it to remind everybody that the rooms that we were listening to these speakers in weren't optimal, and that plays a massive role.
No, they weren't, but the Amphions did sound like Amphions in that room. Yeah, and Andrish thought the same. No, but absolutely not impressive. But that's almost how they're so good for translation.
That's what I get from the Focal Shape 65s, and I'm kind of actually getting with these Evo Twins, but I need more time with them. I need to do a mix on them. So there's me and Ed are thinking about just now what our next multi-track's going to be, because I need to keep mixing to kind of figure out what I'm kind of wanting to keep. But yeah, I'm finding that the hybrid approach has been more beneficial to me, because I am learning more about the translation. And yeah, it's great that I've got the All OS 5X and I've got real phones, but having the real thing in front of you and having different sound characteristics is important, because the thing is, what I do with real phones is I only ever use one room. So there's always one room I was using for speaker translation. But obviously, as I've said, I'm in the same room and I've got two different sets of speakers and they could be in the exact same fucking space and the two of them sound drastically different. So having multiple speakers in the room and knowing that you can trust them and they tell you the right things is so important. And that's what I think is the journey that many of you wanting to do this professionally, we genuinely do believe. We know it's costly, but we do believe that it's the journey you maybe should be considering. If you're on speakers right now and you could say, yeah, I've got a really, really, really expensive pair of monitors like the way Ed was, that's all I need. We would maybe argue that you maybe need to add another speaker onto that. And you know what? You should probably add a really, really good pair of headphones. And I think you shouldn't scrimp on either. I think you should get the best for both. Because the better your monitoring is, the better you can trust your own decisions. But the difficulty that we're finding is that price seems to be kind of irrelevant at a certain stage. Now, I'm finding that, again, pre-Sonos Era Studio 8s, they can't compare to the focal shapes. When you're talking like £400 a pair, £1,000 a pair.
I don't think price will ever be irrelevant because, the PSIs are what they cost for a reason. They're just insanely high quality. But expense doesn't necessarily equate to translation or usability. And that's, I think, what we're getting at is that you can have the greatest sounding studio in the world, but if the mixers aren't working elsewhere, what's the point? And this is the sad reality of buying a 10 grand set of speakers and being like, cool. Doesn't quite translate as well as I thought it would.
Yeah.
I need something else to counterbalance that. Some people go from studio to studio and use Trinov to get that even room sound. Trinov does work wonders, but I'm uncovering problems with it. Again, coming up in a video. It helps in a massive way, don't get me wrong. But ultimately, as I think we've covered, it's all about the average.
Yeah, it is.
I never thought the average would be so important. It's remarkable. Now, what concerns me is finding an average, I think maybe at the level we're at now, for us does involve multiple sets of speakers and multiple sets of headphones. I think as we evolve, I think we will probably find that 2 sets of speakers and 2 sets of go-to headphones will be what we need once we've worked out what we need to listen for in each of those devices and how those elements translate, and as a collective between that handful of devices rather than a huge collective of devices, how mixers are working for us. I think that's just annoyingly, that's just down to time spent on the tools and experience. And it could take years. And like Spike's got, how old, I don't even know how old he is, but he's probably got 40 years mixing experience. Yeah. Certainly 30 years on both of us.
Yep. And I think, that...
You can't put a price on that.
You can't.
We can, 10 grand a song.
But I do think that what these discussions are great for is sharing the journey, because at the end of the day, we wouldn't be able to share this with you unless we went through this. And I get it's frustrating for people because, it is very easy to get yourself in a very cozy place, and that's why I was talking about, price sometimes becomes irrelevant. But what I meant by that would be, I'm starting to understand my ears right now. So in terms of me...
that's a whole nother rabbit hole.
So what I'm learning about me is that I get distracted by high frequencies. Like I am somebody that gets to, I notice them. Like I've always been that way. And it wasn't until Gearfest and the PSIs and then mixing on again, trying out the pre-Sonos Era Studio 8s and stuff. And then the Focals with the beryllium tweeters and Gearfest, I was learning that my distraction a lot of the times is in the top end. So as good as Ed's PSIs do sound, they wouldn't work for me because they are so unbelievably detailed on the top end. And what frustrates me so much about many people online is that they'll be like, yeah, just bring down the high end then. It's like the detail just isn't in frequency. Like the PSIs are detailed because of the design. You could bring down the high frequencies, but the top end's still going to be fucking super detailed. Yeah, and when I listen to the PSIs,
that's a good point.
I always get drawn in by the detail, and I know, me being me, I end up fucking working on the cymbals and all the up top bits because they would distract me. Where when I had these Focal Alpha Twins today, as soon as I put them on, I was like, whoa, these are too bright. put them in Roomy Q Wizard, and I could see it from 5K up. And I took 4 dB, a high frequency shelf. I took down 4 dB on both, and straight away I was like, there we go. I'm not getting distracted by the high end. Measured it, and it measured right. Even in the Kali IN5s, they've got this thing that starts at like 12, 13K. It's a big 6 dB like hump. Then it goes all the way up to like 15K. And I think I'm hearing that in the top end. And I think that was annoying me when I was doing snares and stuff. And so then I was looking at the DSP side in the back, and like, should I be using the DSPs and blah, blah, blah. And I think half the battle is trying to find out where your ear sits and what is it that you need to get. What system is going to not distract you and is going to make you make the right decisions. That's the journey. You cannot do it in a fucking speaker shop. I get really frustrated when people say, just go to a speaker shop and just get them in a room and you just listen to loads of music that you know. No, you have to mix on it.
That's like a quarter of the story.
That's an audiophile thing.
Another quarter is listening to them in your room, and the other half is mixing.
100%.
Because it's one thing getting a speaker that you like the sound of, but does it work for you?
Yep.
And I mean, I was halfway there with my speaker search, I think, because I knew the PMCs made everything sound good, and they were impressive, and I didn't want that. I did want to have to work. And I thought, okay, the PSIs give me all the detail. I'm going to be able to hear everything. I'm just going to be easy to make stuff sound good. So I was half right, but I think then I created more problems for myself. And that's just experience of trying different
100%.
speakers. Now, I am forever grateful for all the brands who lent me speakers for that, and the distributors who lent me speakers for that test, and for people who continue to support us with products, because we're in a very fortunate position to try lots of different things. So hopefully you guys get insights on these things from us, because we do a lot of work behind the scenes researching all this stuff.
Big time.
But we love it because it is pushing us on our journeys to understanding what works for us and what we like. And I think our perceptions have changed. You know, I was like, oh yeah, Harman curve, whatever, just put headphones on. It sounds like how it does on the headphones. But that was very naive in hindsight, because the Harman curve does make a massive difference. I suspect my next big rabbit hole is going to be Harman curve in really good quality headphones. The other set of headphones I got this week are ridiculous. Harman on those versus speaker sound in the room. I know when Paul came and heard the PSIs. Now, I've got the PSIs sounding 100% better than when you last heard them, with the tweeters outside, with the better positioning to minimize the 100 hertz null and Trinov working. But I know from listening to Harman so much since, the sound that your ears are gravitating to, which is very different to my hearing, which is gravitating towards the speakers, which is ironic because I used to do live sound, well, still do a bit, and that was always, lows of sub and top end, depending on where you stood in the room. Certainly was a little bit more smiley faced maybe than in the studio, and that's why my first bunch of mixers were quite scooped. Imagine how shit they sounded on DT 770s. Scoop mix on scoop headphones. Fuck me. Don't go listening to that for anyone who's going to try that. Hey there, Ed here. You may recognise my voice from doing all the other DistroKid advert segments. This time I didn't want to just do a typical advert talking about stuff to do with DistroKid. I actually wanted to give you my feedback about the service, because I genuinely do use DistroKid for uploading my music. And I know Paul does, and it turns out Dan Worrell does as well. I've used DistroKid since 2019. As you can see on the screen, I have 6 releases so far. It is genuinely super easy to use. The tracks get into Spotify within 24 hours, which is remarkable. Apple Music takes a little bit longer. I'd suggest giving that 10 to 14 days. The hyperfollow links are really useful for advanced promotion of your tracks, and the promo cards are really great visual aids for social media promotion. Ooh, I particularly like that one. DistroKid collect all the royalties from your streaming services, and here you can find an itemized breakdown of where all your income has come from. There's also a DistroKid referral where you can save your friends $10 per sign-up by creating your own VIP referral link. So it's learning your room, learning your equipment, mixing on it. You can't just listen to pre-recorded music on speakers to gauge them. It just doesn't work. That was why I chose the PSIs over the ATCs. I did a mix on the ATCs. Sounded great. Put the PSIs on and wow, instantly it was, that, and that. Boom, went in, fixed it. But then maybe I overfixed it. I don't know, because I didn't finish the mix on the ATCs. So it's learning. It's just constantly learning, constantly trying everything. That's what's just so unbelievably time consuming about it all.
And it's, I think, again, I'm not going to say like who this person is, but like there's an engineer that I know that was mixing on a certain pair of speakers that were trying them out, and they lost a very big artist.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's scary, the fact that they're like, I cannot mix on this brand of speakers. I cannot do it. Like, it just doesn't work for me. Where you can get, again, I know there's a big YouTuber that mixes with these and that, and he's like, these are my favourite speakers of all time. And, you know, you've got another, I know, again, my good friend Emrich, he's like, for example, let's just say Focals. He's like, don't like Focals. I was like, what's this sound? What's this house sound? He went, very mid-range forward. But I always know, normally, if somebody's mixed on Focals. And there's certain, I think, some people used to do that with NS10s. Many people are like, yeah, I know. Like, mastering engineers are great to speak to. If you speak to quite a few mastering engineers, they've got, between them, they've got this kind of guessing game to make things fun sometimes. So they'll be like, yeah, I was mixed on NS10s. I was mixed on Focals. I was mixed on ATCs. And it's like a little guessing game to make it fun. And because over time, mastering engineers will pick up, especially if they're working with certain artists and they certain mixers, and they know what they use. They're kind of, but then, and it's amazing even to think that certain mixers have a sound because of what they use, and their sound is contributed to the speakers, could be to the headphones.
I like playing the preamp game, thinking, okay, is that being recorded on a Neve, an API, or an SSL preamp? And I think certainly between Neve and API on a vocal and a drum kit, I think you can tell when you get into it. That kind of low mid build up is when Neve's quite a lot, eh? Yeah, it's kind of focused versus, build up. So the bad news, guys, is you've just got to do the groundwork. Yeah. And do the legwork. There is no easy, cheap shortcut for this. No, there isn't. And that's what is infuriating. But for me, that's what's the beauty of this. Now, I massively underestimated all these rabbit holes would be going down when I sold my live sound business to pursue this full time. It was maybe a bit naive in hindsight, but I don't begrudge myself for that. I just embrace the journey that it is and crack on, because I think learning is the fountain of youth. It excites me on a daily basis. It frustrates the living shizzle out of me as well. But ultimately, I enjoy it, and that's what this is about. And I think probably the best kind of, if we could end this podcast and we could say, what do we want you to take from this? Don't buy Barefoots. Yeah. No, wasn't that right? Sorry. I've still not listened to Barefoot, so I want to listen to them now. But I'd say the thing that I want everybody to take from this is that regardless of how expensive something is, regardless of how amazing it sounds when you listen to pre-recorded, like pre-mixed music, it does not have any relevance to how you will make mixing decisions on them. You need to be able to separate that. You need to separate the mixing experience from the listening experience. These are two different things, and I think it's something that many people, us included, have gotten very kind of confused about. I always thought the listening experience was like, and the mixing experience were tied together. With one thing that we can give you that we've learned is they are completely different processes, and you need to focus on something that makes you make the right decisions, that when you do go on these, beautifully sounding monitors, the mix just goes, oh, wow, this mix sounds amazing. That's what, again, hi-fi speakers, that's what I've learned about the edifiers. Their job is to take music that sounds incredible already and do something to it and make it better. These 5-10% improvements if they can. Yeah. But when it comes to mixing, that's hi-fi world, isn't it? Yeah. And when it comes to mixing, you need to focus on the meat and two veg. You need to have a monitoring setup that's going to tell you exactly what you need to know. Vocals, how loud should they be? Have you got issues in the vocal that you need to be fixed? Bass, how loud is the bass? How much low end? How much space is it filling out? Panning, right? Is the panning correct? Is the soundstage correct? Drums,
Again, how much compression do I need? Can I judge compression on them? All of these things that at the end of the day, it doesn't, again, you could be on Amphions and be like, well, have I got, that's one thing I found really interesting is that when people talk about certain monitors that they have to impress clients, because they'll say, well, if I mix on them, but if I bring a client in and I let them hear them, they'll be like, it's not that impressive. So they have these big, massive fucking mains that are just for the clients, the big, massive bottom end and, you know, these kind of just big, expansive sounds. So they're like, yeah, fuck yeah, this mix sounds fucking amazing. But just because that's what they love the most doesn't mean that's what you mix on. And Emra, again, I'll leave you with one last thing Emra said to me today. He was like, and this is another thing because I've got a certain smaller speaker coming. If you can make smaller speakers sound big, he went, it just works the way up. And that's and we are dealing big and small. And really, your job as a mix engineer is just to make sure that you can get things to translate. So when it does open up, it sounds amazing. And when you go down to little 3.5-inch speakers, that thing still goes, wow, yeah, this sounds fucking amazing. It's all about translation and how you get there as a journey.
The more average your meat and two veg feels, the better it is.
That's how we'll end the podcast.
On that ginger bombshell, it has just occurred to me something, Paul, that the way Scotland might be able to win some gold medals this summer is by being part of Team GB at the Olympics.
Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye. Jesus Christ.
I don't know if I said that right.
You didn't. You never do. Your punchlines are fucking terrible. On that bombshell. Bye-bye.